Hello and good evening, or morning, or afternoon if you're anywhere else. As for me, though, the sun has set, the darkness has settled in. It's time to get nice and cozy. Hello there, Nimwee Bear. Good evening. Come in. So, for tonight, I've decided to entertain myself by reading some more of my favorite fantasy series. And of course, you're welcome to listen in and come along for the ride. We're currently on book 2 of the series called The Belgariad. Namely, it's called The Queen of Sorcery. And we're on chapter 18, so goodness gracious, quite a bit has happened already. If you have any questions as we proceed, feel free to ask. I'll answer stuff in between paragraphs. For now, we're just going to go ahead and jump right in. So, cozy up, and here we go. Chapter 18. They left Grinnick's house before dawn the next morning, dressed once more in their traveling clothes. They slipped quietly out a back gate and proceeded through those narrow alleys and back streets Silk always seemed able to find. The sky to the east was beginning to lighten when they reached the massive bronze gate on the south end of the island. "How long until the gate opens?" Mr. Wolf asked one of the legionnaires. "Not much longer," the legionnaire told him. "Just as soon as we can see the far bank clearly." Wolf grunted. He had grown quite mellow the evening before, and he was obviously troubled by a headache this morning. He dismounted, went to one of the pack horses, and drank from a leather water skin. "That isn't going to help, you know," Antpole told him a bit smugly. He chose not to answer. "I think it's going to be a lovely day today," she said brightly, looking first at the sky and then at the men around her who slumped in their saddles in attitudes of miserable dejection. "You're a cruel woman, Bulgara," Barak said sadly. "Did you talk to Grinnick about that ship?" Mr. Wolf asked. "I think so," Barak replied. "I seem to remember saying something about it." "It's fairly important," Wolf said. "What's this?" Antpole asked. "I thought it might not be a bad idea to have a ship waiting off the mouth of the River of the Woods," Wolf said. "If we have to go to Sithistor, it would probably be better to sail there rather than wade through the swamps in northern Nyissa." "That's a very good idea, actually," she approved. "I'm surprised it occurred to you, considering your condition last night." "You suppose we could talk about something else?" he asked somewhat plaintively. It grew imperceptibly lighter, and the command to open the gate came from the watchtower on the wall above. The legionnaire slipped the iron bar and swung the ponderous gate open. Mandaralin at his side, Silk led them out through the thick portal and across the bridge that spanned the dark waters of the Nadrain. By noon, they were 8 leagues south of Tol Honeth, and Mr. Wolf had somewhat regained his composure, though his eyes still seemed a bit sensitive to the bright spring sunlight, and he winced now and then when a bird sang a bit too near. "Riders coming up behind," Hedar said. "How many?" Barak asked. 2. "Ordinary travelers, perhaps," Antpole said. The 2 figures on horseback appeared from around a bend behind them and stopped. They spoke together for a moment or two, and then came on, their bearing somewhat cautious. They were a peculiar pair. The man wore a green Tolnedran mantle, a garment not really suited for riding. His forehead was quite high, and his hair was carefully combed to conceal his encroaching baldness. He was very skinny, and his ears stuck out from the side of his head like flaps. His companion appeared to be a child dressed in a hooded traveling cloak and a kerchief across her face to keep out the dust. "Good day to you," the skinny man greeted them politely as the pair drew alongside. "Hello," Silk returned. "Warm for so early in the year, isn't it?" the Tolnedrina said. "We noticed that," Silk agreed. "I wonder," the skinny man asked, "do you have a bit of water you could spare?" "Of course," Silk said. He looked at Garion and gestured towards the pack animals. Garion dropped back and unhooked a leather water skin from one of the packs. The stranger removed the wooden stopper and carefully wiped the mouth of the skin. He offered the bag to his companion. She removed her kerchief and looked at the skin with an expression of perplexity. "Like this, you're my lady," the man explained, taking the skin back, raising it in both hands and drinking. "I see," the girl said. Garion looked at her more closely. The voice was familiar for some reason, and there was something about her face. She was not a child, though. She was very small, and there was a kind of self-indulged petulance about her tiny face. Garion was almost certain he had seen her somewhere before. The Tolnedrin handed the water skin back to her, and she drank, making a small face at the resinous taste. Her hair was a purplish black, and there were faint dark smears on the collar of her traveling cloak that indicated that the color was not natural. "Thank you, Jeebers," she said after she had drunk. "And thank you, sir," she said to Silk. Garion's eyes narrowed as a dreadful suspicion began to grow in his mind. "Are you going far?" the skinny man asked Silk. "Quite a ways," Silk answered. "I'm Radek of Boktor, a Drazian merchant, and I'm bound to the south of Sandarian woolens. I leave. This break in the weather destroyed the market in Tol Honeth, so I thought I'd try Tol Rain. It's in the mountains, and it's probably still cold there." "You're taking the wrong road then," the stranger said. "The road to Tol Rain lines off to the east." "I've had a bit of trouble on that road," Silk said glibly. "Robbers, you know. I thought it'd be safer to go through Tol Baroon." "What a coincidence," the skinny man told him. "My pupil and I are bound for Tol Baroon ourselves." "Yes," Silk admitted. "Quite a coincidence. Perhaps we could ride along together." Silk looked doubtful. "I don't see any reason why not," Aunt Pole decided before he could refuse. "You're most kind, gracious lady," the stranger said. "I am Master Jeebers, fellow of the Imperial Society, a tutor by profession. Perhaps you've heard of me." "I can't really say so," Silk told him, "although that's not too remarkable, since we're strangers here in Tolnedra." Jeebers looked a bit disappointed. "I suppose that's true," he said. "This is my pupil, Lady Cheryl. Her father's a Grand Master Merchant, the Baron Relden. I'm accompanying her to Tol Baroon, where she's to visit relatives." Arian knew that was not true. The tutor's name had confirmed his suspicions. He rode several miles farther, with Jeebers babbling animatedly at Silk. He spoke endlessly about his learnings and continually prefaced his remarks with references to important people who seemed to rely on his judgment. Although he was tiresome, he appeared to be quite harmless. His pupil rode beside Aunt Pole, saying very little. "I think it's time we stopped for a bite to eat," Aunt Pole announced. Would you and your pupil care to join us, Master Jeebers? We have plenty. I'm quite overcome by your generosity, the tutor said. We'd be delighted. They stopped the horses near a small bridge that crossed a brook and led them into the shade of a thick clump of willows not far from the road. Hyunsu, thank you for following. Welcome in. Durnik built a fire, and Aunt Pole began to unload her pots and kettles. Master Jeebers' pupil sat in her saddle until the tutor quickly stepped over to help her down. She looked at the slightly marshy ground near the brook unenthusiastically. Then she glanced imperiously at Garion. You, boy, she called, fetch me a cup of fresh water. The brook's right there, he told her, pointing. She stared at him in amazement. But the ground's all muddy, she objected. It does seem that way, doesn't it? He admitted, and then quite deliberately turned his back on her and went over to help his aunt. Aunt Pole, he said after several moments of debating with himself. Yes, dear? I don't think the Lady Cheryl's who she says she is. Oh? I'm not completely positive, but I think she's the Princess Enedra, the one who came into the garden when we were at the palace. Yes, dear, I know. You know? Of course. Would you hand me the salt, please? Isn't it dangerous to have her with us? Not really, she said. I think we can manage it. Won't she be a lot of bother? An imperial princess is supposed to be a lot of bother, dear. After they had eaten a savory stew, which seemed to Garion quite good, but which their little guest appeared to find distasteful, Jeebers began to approach a subject which had obviously been on his mind since they first met. Despite the best efforts of the legions, the roads are never entirely safe, the fussy man said. It's imprudent to travel alone, and the Lady Cheryl's been entrusted to my care. Since I'm responsible for her safety, I was wondering if we might travel along with you. We wouldn't be any bother, and I'd be more than happy to pay for whatever food we eat. Silk glanced quickly at Aunt Pole. Of course, she said. Silk looked surprised. There's no reason we can't travel together, she went on. We're all going to the same place, after all. Silk shrugged. Anything you say. Garion knew the idea was a mistake so serious that it bordered on disaster. Jeebers would not be a good traveling companion, and his pupil showed every sign of quickly becoming intolerable. She was obviously accustomed to extensive personal service, and her demands were probably made without thought. They were still demands, however, and Garion knew immediately who was most likely to be expected to attend them. He got up and walked around on the far side of the clump of willows. He already knows. He's like, oh, it's going on me. No, please, no, please, no. The fields beyond the trees were pale green in the spring sunshine, and small white clouds drifted lazily across the sky. Garion leaned against a tree and gazed out at the fields without actually seeing them. He would not become a servant, no matter who their little guest might be. He wished there were some way he could get that firmly established right at the outset, before things got out of hand. Have you lost your senses, Pole? He heard Mr. Wolf say somewhere behind him among the trees. Ranboroon's probably got every legion in Tolnedra looking for her by now. This is my province, old wolf, Aunt Pole told him. Don't interfere. I can manage things so that we won't be bothered by the legions. We don't have time to coddle her, the old man said. I'm sorry, Pole, but the child's going to be an absolute little monster. You saw the way she acted toward her father. It's no great chore to break bad habits, she said, unconcerned. Wouldn't it be simpler to just arrange to have her taken back to Tol Honeth? She's already run away once, Aunt Pole answered. If we send her back, she'll just run away again. I'll feel much more comfortable having her Imperial Little Highness where I can put my hands on her when I need her. When the proper time comes, I don't want to have to take the world apart looking for her. Wolf sighed. Have it your way, Paul. Naturally. Just keep the brat away from me, he said. She sets my teeth on edge. Do any of the others know who she is? Garion does. Garion? That's surprising. Not really, Aunt Pole said. He's brighter than he looks. A new emotion began to grow in Garion's already confused mind. Aunt Pole's obvious interest in Sinedra sent a sharp pang through him. With a certain amount of shame, he realized that he was jealous of the attention the girl was receiving. In the days that followed, Garion's fears quickly proved to be well-founded. An inadvertent remark about Falder's farm had revealed quite early to the princess his former status as a scullery boy, and she used the knowledge heartlessly to browbeat him into 100 stupid little errands every day. To make it all worse, each time he tried to resist, Aunt Pole would firmly remind him to pay more attention to his manners. Inevitably, he became quite surly about the whole business. The princess developed a story about the reason for her departure from Tol Honeth as they rode south. The story changed daily, growing more wildly implausible with every passing league. At first, she seemed content to be on a simple excursion to visit relatives. Then, she dropped dark hints about flight from a marriage to an ugly old merchant. Next, there were even darker hints about a plot to capture her and hold her for ransom. Finally, in a crowning effort, she confided to them that the proposed kidnapping was politically motivated, a part of some vast scheme to gain power in Tolnedra. She's an awful liar, isn't she? Garion asked Aunt Pole when they were alone one evening. Yes, dear, Aunt Pole agreed. Lying is an art. A good lie shouldn't be embellished so much. She'll need a lot more practice if she plans to make a career of it. Finally, about 10 days after they had left Tol Honeth, the city of Tol Borun came into sight in the afternoon sun. It looks like this is where we part company, Silk said to Jeepers with a certain amount of relief. Aren't you going into the city? Jeepers asked. I don't think so, Silk answered. We don't really have any business to take care of there, and the usual explanations and searches just waste time, not to mention the expense of the bribes. We'll go around Tol Borun and pick up the road to Tol Rain on the other side. We can ride a bit farther with you then, Sinedra said quickly. My relatives live on an estate to the south of the city. Jeepers stared at her in amazement. Aunt Pole drew in her horse and looked at the small girl with a raised eyebrow. This seems like as good a place as any of us to have a little talk, she said. Silk looked quickly at her and then nodded. I believe, little lady, Aunt Pole told the girl when they had all dismounted, that the time has come for you to tell us the truth. But I have, Sinedra protested. Oh, come now, child, Aunt Pole said. Those stories of yours have been very entertaining, but you don't actually think anyone believed them, do you? Some of us already know who you are, but I really think we should get it out in the open. You know? Sinedra faltered. Of course, dear, Aunt Pole said. Would you like to tell them, or shall I? Sinedra's little shoulders drooped. Tell them who I am, Master Jeebers, she ordered quietly. Do you really think that's wise, your ladyship? Jeebers asked nervously. They already know anyway, she said. If they were going to do anything to us, they'd have done it a long time ago. We can trust them. Jeebers drew in a deep breath, and then spoke rather formally. I have the honor to introduce Her Imperial Highness, the Princess Sinedra, daughter to His Imperial Majesty, Ran Boroon the 23rd, and the jewel of the House of Boroon. Silk whistled, and his eyes widened momentarily. The others showed similar signs of amazement. The political situation in Tol Honeth had become far too volatile, too menacing for Her Highness to remain safely in the capital, Jeepers went on. The Emperor commissioned me to convey his daughter secretly here to Tol Boroon, where the members of the Boroon family can protect her from the plots and machinations of the Vordus, the Honeths, and the Horbites. I am proud to say that I've managed to execute my commission rather brilliantly, with your help, of course. I'll mention your assistance in my report. A footnote, perhaps. Maybe even an appendix. Barak pulled at his... Sorry. Barak pulled at his beard, his eyes thoughtful. An imperial princess travels across half of Tolnedra with only a schoolmaster for protection? He questioned. At a time when they're knifing and poisoning each other in the streets. It does seem a trifle risky, doesn't it? Hedar agreed. Thank you, Lee. Did thine emperor charge thee with this task in person? Mandaran asked Jeebers. It wasn't necessary, Jeebers said stiffly. His Majesty has a great deal of respect for my judgment and discretion. He knew that I'd be able to devise a safe disguise and secure mode of travel. The princess assured me of his absolute confidence in me. It all had to be done in utmost secrecy, of course. That's why she came to my chambers in the middle of the night to advise me of his instructions, and why we left the palace without telling anyone why we were. His voice trailed off, and he stared at Sinedra in horror. You might as well tell him the truth, dear, Aunt Pole advised the little princess. I think he's guessed already. Sinedra's chin lifted arrogantly. Me, Jeebers, she told him. My father had nothing to do with it. Jeebers went deathly pale, and he nearly collapsed. What idiocy made you decide to run away from your father's palace? Barak demanded of the tiny girl. All Tolnedra's probably looking for you, and we're caught right in the middle. Gently, Wolf said to the hulking Jarek. She may be a princess, but she's still a little girl. Don't frighten her. The question's to the point, though, Hedar observed. If we're caught with an imperial princess in our company, we'll all see the inside of a Tolnedran dungeon. He turned to Sinedra. Do you have an answer, or were you just playing games? She drew herself up haughtily. I'm not accustomed to explaining my actions to servants. We're going to have to clear up a few misconceptions before long, I see, Wolf said. Just answer the question, dear, Aunt Pole told the girl. Never mind who asked it. My father had me imprisoned in the palace, Sinedra said in a rather offhand way, as if that explained everything. It was intolerable, so I left. There's another matter too, but that's a matter of politics. You wouldn't understand. You'd probably be surprised at what we'd understand, Sinedra, Mr. Wolf told her. I'm accustomed to be addressed as my lady, she said tartly, or as your highness. And I'm accustomed to being told the truth, I thought you were in charge, Sinatra said to Silk. Appearances are deceiving, Silk observed blandly. I'd answer the question. It's an old treaty, she said. I didn't sign it, so I don't see why I should be bound by it. I'm supposed to present myself in the throne room at Riva on my 16th birthday. We know that, Borak said impatiently. What's the problem? I'm not going, that's all, Sinatra announced. I won't go to Riva, and no one can make me go. The queen in the woods of the Dryads is my kinswoman, and she'll give me sanctuary. Jeebers had partially recovered. What have you done? He demanded aghast. I undertook this with the clear understanding that I'd be rewarded, even promoted. You've put my head on the block, you little idiot. Jeepers, she cried, shocked at his words. Let's get off the road a ways, Silk suggested. We've obviously got quite a bit to discuss, and we're likely to be interrupted here on the main highway. Probably a good idea, Wolf agreed. Let's find some quiet place and set up for the night. We'll decide what we're going to do, and then we can start out fresh in the morning. They remounted and rode across the rolling fields towards a line of trees that marked the course of a winding country lane about a mile away. How about there? Durnick suggested, pointing at a broad oak which stood beside the lane, its branches beginning to leaf out in the late afternoon sunlight. That should do, Wolf said. It was pleasant in the dappled shade beneath the spreading limbs of the oak. The lane was lined with low stone walls, mossy and cool. A stile stepped up over one of the walls just there, and a path meandered across the field from it toward a nearby pond, sparkling in the sun. We can put the fire down behind one of the walls, Durnick said. It won't be seen from the main road that way. I'll get some wood, Garion volunteered, looking at the dead limbs littering the grass beneath the tree. They had by now established a sort of routine in the setting up of the night's encampment. The tents were erected, the horses watered and picketed, and the fire was started all within the space of an hour. Then Durnick, who had noticed a few telltale circles on the surface of the pond, heated an iron pin in the fire and carefully hammered it into a hook. What's that for? Garion asked him. I thought some fish might be good for supper, the smith said, wiping the hook on the skirt of his leather tunic. He laid it aside, then, and lifted a second pin out of the fire with a pair of tongs. Would you like to try your luck too? Garion grinned at him. Borak, who sat nearby combing the snarls out of his beard, looked up rather wistfully. I don't suppose you'd have time to make another hook, would you? He asked. Durnick chuckled. It only takes a couple minutes. We'll need bait, Borak said, getting up quickly. Where's your spade? Not long afterward, the three of them crossed the field to the pond, cut some saplings for poles, and settled down to serious fishing. The fish, it appeared, were ravenous and attacked the worm-baited hooks in schools. Within the space of an hour, nearly 24 respectable-sized trout lay in a gleaming row on the grassy bank of the pond. Aunt Pole inspected their catch gravely when they returned as the sky turned rosy overhead with the setting of the sun. Very nice, she told them, but you forgot to clean them. Oh, Borak said. He looked slightly pained. We thought that, well, what I mean is, as long as we caught them. He left it hanging. Go on, she said with a level gaze. Borak sighed. I guess we'd better clean them, he regretfully told Durnick and Garion. You're probably right, Durnick agreed. The sky had turned purple with evening, and the stars had begun to come out when they sat down to eat. Aunt Pole had fried the trout to a crisp golden brown, and even the sulky little princess found nothing to complain about as she ate. After they had finished, they set aside their plates and took up the problem of Senedra and her flight from Tolhoneth. Jeepers had sunk into such abject melancholy that he could offer little to the discussion, and Senedra adamantly announced that even if they were to turn her over to the Baroons in the city, she would run away again. In the end, they reached no conclusion. "We're in trouble no matter what we do," Silk summed it up all ruefully. "Even if we try to deliver her to her family, there's bound to be some embarrassing questions, and I'm sure she can be counted on to invent a colorful story that will put us in the worst possible light." "We can talk about it some more in the morning," Aunt Pole said. Her placid tone indicated that she had already made up her mind about something, but she did not elaborate. Shortly before midnight, Jeebers made his escape. They were all awakened by the thudding of his horse's hooves as the panic-stricken tutor fled at a gallop toward the walls of Tolwaroon. Silk stood in the flickering light of the dying fire, his face angry. "Why didn't you stop him?" he asked Tedar, who had been standing watch. "I was told not to," the leather-clad Algar said, with a glance at Aunt Pole. "It solves the only real problem we had," Aunt Pole explained. "The schoolmaster would only have been excess baggage." "You knew he was going to run away?" Silk asked. "Naturally. I helped him arrive at the decision. He'll go straight to the Baroons and try to save his own skin by informing them that the princess ran away from the palace on her own and that we have her now." "You have to stop him then," Senedra said in a ringing voice. "Go after him! Bring him back!" "After all the trouble I went to persuading him to leave?" Aunt Pole asked. "Don't be foolish." "How dare you speak to me like that?" Senedra demanded. "You seem to forget who I am." "Young lady," Silk said urbanely, "I think you'd be amazed at how little Polgara is concerned about who you are." "Polgara?" Senedra faltered. "The Polgara. I thought you said she was your sister." "I lied," Silk confessed. "It's a vice I have." "Aunt Mage, welcome in. You didn't do your catchphrase, though, but that's okay. It's been a few months after all." "You're not an ordinary merchant," the girl accused him. "He's Prince Keldar of Drasnia," Aunt Pole said. "The others have similar eminence. I'm sure you can see how little your title impresses us. We have our own titles, so we know how empty they are." "If you're Polgara, then he must be—" The princess turned to stare at Mr. Wolf, who had seated himself on the lowest step of the stile to pull on his shoes. "Yes," Aunt Pole said. "He really doesn't look the part, does he?" "What are you doing in Tolnedra?" Senedra asked in a stunned voice. "Are you going to use magic of some kind to control the outcome of the succession?" "Why would we?" Mr. Wolf said, getting to his feet. "Tolnedrans always seem to think their politics shake the world, but the rest of the world's really not all that concerned about who gains the throne in Tolhoneth. We're here on a matter of much greater urgency." He looked off into the darkness in the direction of Tolbaroon. "It'll take Jeebers a certain amount of time to convince the people in the city that he's not a lunatic," he said, "but it probably would be a good idea if we left the area. I imagine we'd better stay away from the main highway." "That's no problem," Silk assured him. What about me? Sinedra asked. You wanted to go to the wood of the Dryads, Antpole told her. We're going in that direction anyway, so you'll stay with us. We'll see that Queen Xantha says when we get to you there. Am I to consider myself a prisoner then? The princess asked stiffly. You can if it makes you feel better, dear, Antpole said. She looked at the tiny girl critically in the flickering firelight. I'm going to have to do something about your hair, though. What did you use for dye? It looks awful. And that is the end of chapter 18. And so, Sinedra has joined the party. Definitely an interesting character for sure. Definitely not one I can fully voice myself, being that her voice raises several octaves whenever she gets into arguments, which unfortunately is almost all the time. But she is important. You're hungry? Dang, I had 2 Hot Pockets today. You're in pain right now. Aunt Mage, what happened? Did you trip or fall? Did you stab yourself on something? Did you get hit by a doorknob? Have you fallen through the ceiling? I did that once. I couldn't give you one? No. Hi, Lady Mothball. You are correct. I did not die of old age because I'm not that old. Yeah. It's exactly like that, Lee. 100 years minimum. Oh, please, I've been telling stories since the beginning of time, since stories were ever made. After all, that's why I'm here. You had to break ice off the driveway, and your parents would give you nothing but a shovel? That's rough. It will definitely leave you sore. I'm sorry, Aunt Mage. Lie again? Dang. Alright, let's see. Time-wise, we are still looking very good. I do have to admit, though, I am pretty tired today. Because, unfortunately, last night, there was something that came up, and I almost had to go to the hospital. Not for myself. But in the end, I stayed up almost all night, just trying to make sure things were okay. So I'm a little exhausted. So reading actually is pretty nice right now. You were gonna make oatmeal, but you don't want a heartburn? You know, I've never heard of something as bland as oatmeal actually causing heartburn. Interesting. The shovel was not even built for snow, so it was horrible. Yep, I can believe that. You know what started recently? Heaving headed because of that? That's weird. You have Tums, Pepto-Bismol. Those help. Well, Moth. You see, to drink more water, and you were trying on clothes and almost passed out. Lee, do you have insurance? Can you go see someone? Because I'm now worried about you. And I'm not just gonna say like, yeah, go ahead and raw dog a visit to the doctor. Although there are some cheap ones, but like, how do you sweat from doing the simple stuff? I mean, I have answers, but I'm not gonna say. I am worried about you. Please try to take care of yourself better. Okay? You are important. You are a friend. Please be safe. The pepper and they die. Don't be mean. Don't. Get a water strap or something. Little by little, Lee. Little by little, alright? Just keep making progress and it will get better. It will just take some motivation and some sacrifice. So technically you have insurance, but you don't, so This one get heartburn from oatmeal. Ugh. I'm just gonna say don't worry about it, and by that I mean worry about it. Why, hello there, Rayo Wolf. Welcome in. You are correct. Although it is not the usual kind of ASMR. We have the nice low tones, but I don't usually do the triggers and stuff. I just lull you in to a nice sense of comfortability by reading stories. And scold you all the time about your habits. What's wrong with Lee? Lee's working on it, so don't you worry. They're not dead. Alright, we're gonna go ahead and get back into the story now. Since we just finished chapter 18, that logically means we're moving on to chapter 19 of The Queen of Sorcery, book 2 in the Belgariad series. If you're interested in any of the other parts that I've read of this book series, you can go ahead and find the VODs on YouTube. They're around somewhere. I believe in you. I should take the time to organize those. And hey, Rayo Wolf, thanks for following. Enjoy your stay, because here we go. Chapter 19. They moved rapidly south for the next few days, traveling frequently at night to avoid the mounted patrols of legionnaires who were beating the countryside in their efforts to locate Zenedra. Maybe we should have hung on to Jeebers, Barak muttered sourly, after one near brush with the soldiers. He's roused every garrison from here to the border. It might have been better to have him dropped off in some isolated place or something. That or something has a certain ring of finality to it, old friend, Silk said with a sharp little grin. Barak shrugged. It's a solution to a problem. Silk laughed. You really should try not to let your knife do all the thinking for you. That's one quality we find least attractive in our Turek cousins. And we find this compulsion to make clever remarks, which seem to overwhelm our Draznian brothers now and then, almost equally unattractive, Barak told him coolly. Nicely put, Silk said with mock admiration. Lee hopped over onto the YouTube side, and I put everyone back in their place. They rode on, watchful, always ready to hide or to run. During those days, they relied heavily on Hetar's curious ability. Since the patrols searching for them were inevitably mounted, the tall, hawk-faced Algar swept their surroundings with his mind, searching for horses. The warnings he could thus provide usually gave them sufficient notice of the approaching patrols. "What's it like?" Garion asked him one cloudy mid-morning as they rode along a seldom used and weed-grown track to which Silk had led them. "I mean, being able to hear a horse's thoughts." "I don't think I can describe it exactly," Hadar answered. "I've always been able to do it, so I can't imagine what it's like not doing it. There's a kind of reaching out in a horse's mind, sort of inclusiveness. A horse seems to think we instead of I. I suppose it's because in their natural condition, they're members of a herd. After they get to know you, they think of you as a herd mate. Sometimes they even forget that you are not a horse." He broke off suddenly. "Elgarath," he announced sharply. "There's another patrol coming, just beyond that hill over there. 20 or 30 of them." Mr. Wolf looked about quickly. "Have we got time to reach those trees?" He pointed at a thick strand of scrub maple about a half-mile ahead. "If we hurry." "Then run," Wolf ordered, and they all kicked their horses into a sudden burst of speed. He reached the trees just as the first few raindrops of the spring shower that had been threatening all morning pattered on the broad leaves. They dismounted and pushed in among the springy saplings, worming their way back out of sight, leading their horses. The Tolnedran patrol came over the hilltop and swept down into the shallow valley. The captain in charge of the legionnaires pulled in his horse not far from the stand of maples and dispersed his men with a series of sharp commands. They moved out in small groups, scouting the weedy road in both directions and surveying the surrounding countryside from the top of the next rise. The officer and a civilian in a gray riding cloak remained behind, sitting their horses beside the track. The captain squinted distastefully up into the sprinkling rain. "It's going to be a wet day," he said, dismounting and pulling his crimson cloak tighter around him. "Need a snack? You're about to start to hallucinate garlic bread?" "I mean, it is tasty, but it would definitely give you heartburn." "Good night, Mothball. You sleep well." "Have a good night." His companion also swung down and turned so that the party hiding among the maples was able to see his face. Garion felt Hadar tense suddenly. The man in the cloak was a Murgo. "Over here, Captain," the Murgo said, leading his horse into the shelter provided by the outspreading limbs of the saplings at the edge of the stand. Nedra nodded and followed the man in the riding cloak. "Have you had the chance to think over my offer?" the Murgo asked. "I thought it was only speculation," the captain replied. "We don't even know that these foreigners are in this quadrant." "My information is that they're going south, Captain," the Murgo told him. "I think you can be quite certain that they're somewhere in your quadrant." "There's no guarantee that we'll find them, though," the captain said. "And even if we do, it'd be very difficult to do what you propose." "Captain," the Murgo explained patiently, "it's for the safety of the princess, after all. If she's returned to Tol Holneth, the Varduvians are going to kill her. You've read those documents I brought you." "She'll be safe with the Boruns," the captain said. "The Varduvians aren't going to come into southern Tolnedra after her." "The Boruns are only going to turn her over to her father. You're a Borun yourself. Would you defy an emperor of your own house?" The captain's face was troubled. Her only safety is with the Horbites, the Murgo pressed. What guarantees do I have that she'll be safe with them? The best guarantee of all, politics. The Horbites are doing everything in their power to block the Grand Ducador and his march on the throne. Since he wants the princess dead, the Horbites naturally want to keep her alive. It's the only way really to ensure her safety, and you become a wealthy man in the progress. He jingled a heavy purse suggestively. The captain still looked doubtful. Suppose we double the amount, the Murgo said in a voice that almost purred. The captain swallowed hard. It is for her safety, isn't it? Of course it is. It's not as if I were betraying the House of Borun. You're a patriot, Captain, Murgo assured the officer with a cold smile. And Paul was holding Senedra's arm quite firmly as they crouched together among the trees. The tiny girl's face was outraged, and her eyes were blazing. Later, after the legionnaires and their Murgo friend had departed, the princess exploded. How dare they? She raged. And for money! That's Telnedrum politics for you, Silk said as they led their horses out of the stand of saplings into the drizzling morning. But he's a Borun, she protested. A member of my own family. A Telnedran's first loyalty is to his purse, Silk told her. I'm surprised you haven't discovered that by now, Your Highness. A few days later, they topped a hill and saw the wood of the Dryads spreading like a green smudge on the horizon. The showers had blown off, and the sun was very bright. We'll be safe once we reach the wood, Princess told them. The legions won't follow us there. It's to stop them, Garion asked her. The treaty with the Dryads, she said. Don't you know anything? Garion resented that. There's no one about, Hedda reported to Mr. Wolf. We can go slow or wait for dark. Let's make a run for it, Wolf said. I'm getting tired of dodging patrols. They started down the hill at a gallop toward the forest lying ahead of them. There seemed to be none of the usual brushy margin which usually marked the transition from fields to woodlands. The trees simply began. When Wolf led them beneath those trees, the change was as abrupt as if they had suddenly gone inside a house. The wood itself was a forest of incredible antiquity. The great oak spread so broadly that the sky was almost never visible. The forest floor was mossy and cool, and there was very little undergrowth. It seemed to Garion that they were all quite tiny under the vast trees, and there was a strange, hushed quality about the wood. The air was very still, and there was a hum of insects and, from far overhead, a chorus of birdsong. Strange, Dernick said, looking around. I don't see any sign of woodcutters. Woodcutters? Sinatra gasped. In here? They wouldn't dare come into this wood. The wood is inviolate, Dernick, Mr. Wolf explained. The Borun family has a treaty with the Dryads. No one has touched a tree here for over 3,000 years. This is a curious place, Mandaran said, looking around a bit uncomfortably. Methinks I feel a presence here, a presence not altogether friendly. The wood is alive, Sinatra told him. It doesn't really like strangers, but don't worry, Mandaran. You're safe as long as you're here with me. She sounded quite smug about it. Are you sure the patrols won't follow us? Dernick asked Mr. Wolf. Jeebers knew we were coming here after all, and I'm sure he told the Boroons. The Boroons won't violate their treaty with the Dryads, Wolf assured him. Not for any reason. I've never known a treaty the Tolnedrin wouldn't step around if it was to his advantage. Silk spoke skeptically. This one is a bit different, Wolf said. The Dryads gave one of their princesses to a young noble of the House of Boroon. She became the mother of the Emperor of the First Boroon dynasty. The fortunes of the Boroons are very intimately tied up with the treaty. They're not going to gamble with that, not for any reason. What exactly is a Dryad? Garion asked. The strange sense of presence and awareness in the wood made him want to talk to cover the oppressive, watchful silence. A small group, Mr. Wolf said, quite gentle. I've always rather liked them. They aren't human, of course, but that's not all that important. I'm a Dryad, Sinatra said rather proudly. Garion stared at her. Technically, she's right, Wolf said. The Dryad line seems to breed true on the female side of the House of Boroon. That's one of the things that keeps the family honest about the treaty. All those wives and mothers who'd pack up and leave if it were ever broken. She looks human, Garion objected, still staring at the princess. The Dryads are so closely related to humans that the differences are hardly significant, Wolf said. That probably explains why they didn't go mad like the other monsters did when Torak cracked the world. Monsters? Sinatra protested loudly. Your pardon, princess, Wolf apologized. It's an Ulgo term to describe the non-humans who supported Gorim at Proglu when he met with the god Ul. I look like a monster to you, she demanded, tossing her head angrily. A poor choice of words, perhaps, Wolf murmured. Forgive me. Monster indeed, Sinatra fumed. Wolf shrugged. There's a stream not far ahead, if I remember right. We'll stop there and wait until word of our arrival reaches Queen Xantha. It's not a good idea to go into the territory of the Dryads without the Queen's permission. They can get quite nasty if they're provoked. I thought you said they were gentle, Dernick said. Within reason, Wolf told him. But it's not a good idea to irritate people who communicate with trees when you're in the middle of the forest. Unpleasant things have a way of happening. Frowned. That reminds me. You'd better stow your axe away out of sight. Dryads have strong feelings about axes and fires. They're most unreasonable about fire. We'll have to keep our fires small and only for cooking. They rode in under a colossal oak beside a sparkling stream, purling over mossy rocks, dismounted, and set up their dun-colored tents. After they had eaten, Garion wandered around feeling bored. Mr. Wolf was napping, and Silk had lured the others to a dice game. Aunt Pole had seated the princess on a log and was stripping the purple dye from her hair. If you don't have anything else to do, Garion, she said, why don't you go bathe? Bathe? He asked. Where? I'm sure you'll find a pool somewhere along the stream, she said, carefully lathering Sinatra's hair. You want me to bathe in that water? Aren't you afraid I'll catch a cold? You're a healthy boy, dear, she told him, but a very dirty one. Now go wash. Garion gave her a dark look and went to one of the packs for clean clothing, soap, and a towel. And he stamped off upstream, grumbling at every step. Once he was alone under the trees, he felt even more strongly that peculiar sense of being watched. It was not anything definable. There seemed to be nothing specific about it, but rather, it felt as if the oaks themselves were aware of him, and were passing information about his movements among themselves with a kind of vegetative communication that he could not begin to understand. There seemed to be no menace in it, merely a kind of watchfulness. Some distance from the tents, he found a fairly large pool where the stream dropped in a waterfall from the rocks above. The water in the pool was very clear, and he could see the bright pebbles on the bottom and several large trout that eyed him warily. He tested the water with his hand and shuddered. He considered subterfuge, a quick splashing of water on his body and a bit of soap on the more obvious smudges. But on reflection, he gave up the notion, and Paul would settle for nothing less than a complete bath. He sighed bitterly and began to take off his clothing. The first shock, was awful, but after a few minutes, he found that he could bear it. In a short time, it even became exhilarating. The waterfall provided a convenient means of rinsing off the soap, and before long, he found that he was actually enjoying himself. "You're making an awful lot of noise," Sinedra said, standing on the bank and appraising him quite calmly. Garion immediately dove to the bottom of the pool. "Unless one is a fish, however, one can hardly remain underwater indefinitely." After about a minute, he struggled to the surface and popped his head out of the water, gasping and sputtering. "Whatever are you doing?" Sinedra asked. She was wearing a short white tunic, sleeveless and belted at the waist, and open sandals with laces that crisscrossed her slender ankles and calves and tied just below her knees. She carried a towel in one hand. Go away," Garion spluttered. "Don't be so silly," she said, sitting down on a large stone and beginning to unlace her sandals. Her coppery hair was still damp and tumbled in a heavy mass about her shoulders. "What are you doing?" "I want to bathe," she said. "Are you going to be much longer?" "Go someplace else," Garion cried, starting to shiver, but remaining determinedly crouched over in the water, with only his head sticking out. "This place looks just fine," she said. "How's the water?" "Cold," he chattered, "but I'm not coming out until you go away." "He's such a ninny," she told him. He shook his head stubbornly, his face flaming. She sighed with exasperation. "Oh, very well," she said. "I won't look, but I think you're being very silly. At the baths in Tol Honeth, no one thinks anything at all about such things." "This isn't Tol Honeth," he told her pointedly. "I'll turn my back if that'll make you feel better," she said, getting up and standing with her back to the pool. Not entirely trusting her, Garion crept from the pool and, still dripping, jerked on his drawers and hose. "All right," he called. "You can have the pool now." He mopped at his streaming face and hair with his towel. "I'm going back to the tents." "Lady Polgara says that you're to stay with me," she said, calmly untying the cord about her waist. "Aunt Pol said what?" he demanded, terribly shocked. "You're supposed to stay with me to protect me," she told him. She took hold of the hem of her tunic, obviously preparing to take it off. Garion spun about and stared determinedly at the trees. His ears flamed, and his hands trembled uncontrollably. A small silvery laugh, she laughed a small silvery laugh, and he could hear splashing as she entered the pool. She squealed from the shock of the cold water, and then there was more splashing. "Bring me the soap," she commanded. Without thinking, he bent to pick up the soap and caught one brief glimpse at her standing waist-deep in the water before he shut his eyes tightly. He backed towards the pool, his eyes closed and his hands holding the soap thrust out awkwardly behind him. She laughed again and took the soap from his hand. After what seemed an eternity, the princess completed her bath, emerged from the pool, dried herself, and put her clothes back on. Arian kept his eyes firmly shut the entire time. "You Sendars have such curious notions," she said, as they sat together in the sun-warmed glade beside the pool. She was combing her deep red hair, her head inclined to one side and the comb pulling down through the thick, damp tangles. "Baths in Tol Honeth are open to all, and athletic contests are always conducted without clothing. Just last summer, I myself ran against a dozen other girls in the Imperial Stadium. The spectators were most appreciative." "I can imagine," Garion said dryly. "What's that?" she asked, pointing at the amulet resting against his bare chest. "My grandfather gave it to me last Aristide," Garion answered. "Let me see." She held out her hand. He leaned forward. "Take it off so I can see it," she ordered. "I'm not supposed to take it off," he told her. "Mr. Wolf and Aunt Pole say I'm never supposed to take it off for any reason. I think there's a spell of some kind on it." "What a strange idea," she remarked as she bent to examine the amulet. "They aren't really sorcerers, are they?" "Mr. Wolf is 7,000 years old," Garion said. "He knew the god Alder. I've seen him make a tree grow from a small twig in a matter of minutes and set rocks on fire. And Pole cured a blind woman with a single word. Then she can turn herself into an owl." "I don't believe in such things," Sinesha told him. "I'm sure there's another explanation." Arian shrugged and pulled on his linen shirt and brown tunic. He shook his head and raked his fingers through his still damp hair. "You're making an awful mess of it." The old ass was true. Oldest man in the world. "You're making an awful mess of it," she observed critically. "Here, I stay." She stood up and stepped behind him. "Let me do it." She put the comb to his hair and began pulling it through carefully. "You have nice hair for a man," she said. "It's just hair," he said indifferently. She combed in silence for a moment or two, then took his chin in her hand, turned his head, and looked at him critically. She touched his hair at the side a time or two until it was arranged to her satisfaction. "That's better," she decided. "What is happening? Well, it turns out I'm currently reading a book today. Specifically, I'm on chapter 19 of book 2 of my favorite series, The Belgariad. The book is called The Queen of Sorcery. Right now, we have entered into the Forest of the Dryads, and even though things are kinda spooky there, with trees being a little odd, our main protagonist was told by his aunt, "Go take a bath, Stinky." And so he went up, found a nice spot at the river, and suddenly the Imperial Princess that decided to join them is there too, and they're kind of flirting a little. Or at least, she's just doing her own thing, and he's like, "Oh my gosh." Just watch Papyrus beat up Omni-Man on the sun. Stuff is wild. You're right. "That's better," she decided. "Thank you." He was a bit confused by the change in her. She sat down again on the grass, clasped her arms around one knee, and gazed at the sparkling pool. "Arian," she said finally. "Yes?" "What's it like to grow up as an ordinary person?" He shrugged. "I've never been anything but an ordinary person," he told her, "so I wouldn't know what to compare it to." "You know what I mean. Tell me about where you grew up. And what you did and all. So he told her about Falder's farm, about the kitchen and Dernick's smithy and Dorun and Runderig and Zubret. You're in love with Zubret, aren't you? She asked it almost accusingly. I thought I was, but so much has happened since we left the farm that sometimes I can't even remember what she looks like. I think I could do without being in love anyway. From what I've seen, it's pretty painful most of the time. You're impossible, she said, and then she smiled at him, her little face framed in the blazing mass of her sun-touched hair. Probably, he admitted. All right, now you tell me what it's like to grow up as a very special person. I'm not that special. You're an imperial princess, he reminded her. I'd call that pretty special. Oh, that, she said, and then giggled. You know, sometimes since I joined you people, I almost forget that I'm an imperial princess. Almost, he said with a smile, but not quite. No, she agreed. Not quite. She looked out across the pool again. Most of the time, being a princess is very boring. It's all ceremonies and formalities. You have to stand around most of the time listening to speeches or receiving state visitors. There are guards all around all the time, but sometimes I sneak away so I can be by myself. It makes them furious. She giggled again, and then her gaze turned pensive. Let me tell you your fortune, she said, taking his hand. You can tell fortunes? Garion asked. It's only make-believe, she admitted. My maids and I play at it sometimes. We all promise each other high-born husbands and many children. She turned his hand over and looked at it. The silvery mark on his palm was very plain now that the skin was clean. Whatever is that? She asked. I don't know. It's not a disease, is it? No, he said. It's always been there. I think it's got something to do with my family. Aunt Paul doesn't like to have people see it for some reason, so she tries to keep it hidden. How could you hide something like that? She finds things for me to do that keep my hands dirty most of the time. Strange, she said. I have a birthmark too, right over my heart. Would you like to see it? She took hold of the neck of her tunic. I'll take your word for it, Garion told her, blushing furiously. She laughed a silvery, tinkling little laugh. You're a strange boy, Garion. You're not at all like the other boys I've met. They were Tolnedrins, probably, Garion pointed out. I'm a Centaur, or at least that's the way I was raised, so there are bound to be some differences. You sound as if you're not sure what you are. Silk says I'm not a Centaur, Garion says. He says he isn't sure exactly what I am, and that's very odd. Silk can recognize anybody from what he is immediately. Your father thought I was a Riven. Since the Lady Polgar is your aunt and Belgarath's your grandfather, you're probably a sorcerer, Sinatra observed. Garion laughed. Me? That's silly. Besides, the sorcerers aren't a race, not like Chareks or Tolnedrins or Rivens. It's more like a profession, I think. Something like being a lawyer or a merchant. Only there aren't any new ones. The sorcerers are all thousands of years old. Mr. Wolf says that maybe people have changed in some way so that they can't become sorcerers anymore. Sinedra had leaned back and was resting on her elbows, looking up at him. Garion? Yes? Would you like to kiss me? Garion's heart started to pound. Then Dernick's voice called to them from not far away, and for one flaming instant, Garion hated his old friend. Dernick, no! And that is the end of chapter 19. The dynamic of the main character and the princess reminds you of another book you read at school? I'm not surprised by that. One of the main things about this book series is that none of the tropes in it. Who said I think not? But one of the main things about this book series is that the tropes in it, that nothing is new in the slightest. Like, you know exactly what's going to happen, but it's the way it is done, the execution of it all, the characters that are built up almost like, not like living legends. They all very much have flaws and everything, but they're all so well done, and you just love the characters and how they do it. It's very much protagonist-centered morality, which they themselves literally go over. They're all like, is it good versus evil? No, let's make this simple. It's us versus them. But I love this series so very much. It's a lot of fun. The other book is called The Last Book on Earth. Interesting. I stretch. How am I feeling? Nah, I like the suspense. I think, yeah, a mid-stretch. It was alright. I think I'm going to pause on reading the book, and I'm going to gear us up to end stream soon. But first, we can always end something off with bedtime stories. Might as well put you to bed. What's up, AMH? Ask away. Hungry Caterpillar. The Hungry Caterpillar is not a long bookly. This looks new. Do it again. How about I read a new bedtime story that I haven't read before? Doesn't that sound fun? Yeah? Have I gotten the gift that you left in my room in my house in Minecraft? I have not. I have not been on the server in a long while. I should do that. Considering, considering the server will be leaving soon. Next month-ish. Am I literally like, time to get you ready for bed when it's almost midnight for you? Because I just know. But to explain the Minecraft situation. So I've been trying to get the server to play nice with mods because normally, the service that I use is normally very good. But ever since they made changes and added in, like, you know, the AI companion to help you set stuff up, for some reason, nothing works. And even for a while, it broke even just base vanilla server hosting. I've been extremely unsatisfied with the service they provided for me. So, it's gotta go. I'm gonna find a different service to use. Which sucks because, yeah, lifetime 50% discount sounds pretty neat. But, you know, if the service is bad, then what's the point? It's okay, Rayo Wolf. Lee probably shouldn't eat, even though It's better for Lee not to at this time. But then once it is tomorrow, please make sure you eat, drink lots of water, find a way to hydrate yourself and refill your electrolytes as well. That'll also help you, Lee. And hopefully, the food doesn't give you heartburn. So when I decide to read bedtime stories, there's always the classics, but there's a website that I found called lemonsandletters.com, which has a bunch of bedtime stories available for free on there. Water's not gonna cut it. Time for some Gatorade and Powerade then. So, we're going to read a new one because they're constantly adding more all the time, and I love these guys. And this one is called Little Brown Bear Sam. So we'll see how this goes. Is that a sheep or a cat? Wondered Sam, the little brown bear, as he watched the fluffy clouds rushing past the mountain peak, constantly changing shape to resemble different animals. As he watched the cloud formations, he lay comfortably in the grass on a mountain meadow, plucking a few daisies while lost in thought. Sam was still a young bear, but already old enough to be out on his own more often. He had almost outgrown his mother's protection, and she had taught him everything he needed to know, and now regularly sent him alone to forage for food. That's interesting to hear, Asa. Welcome in. While he was out hunting, he liked to lie down in the cool grass and dream. As a large, elegant eagle hovered above him in the sky that day, Sam watched the impressive bird of prey float weightlessly through the air. It seemed to require little effort. Sam was surprised that it didn't even move its wings. Salt water does work. I have a specific combination of different minerals you can add to water to make it more hydrating. I can hit you up with that later, Lee. Oh, how I would love to be a big bird. Then I could fly and see the world from above. I could be in one place today and somewhere completely different tomorrow. I would be able to spot my prey from above and then just swoop down without having to search for it. He rose somewhat heavily from his resting place and made his way down to the river on a growling stomach. Current was fast and the water blue sloshed vigorously against the many small rocks and stones that carefully embedded the river. Coconut water. Something about it sounds traumatic. Coconut water itself is delicious, but just know that it is a natural laxative. So too much is going to definitely run through you. Just a bit. Sam made his way through the rushing river. He spotted a large boulder and sat down on the highest spot. Despite his growling stomach, he didn't feel like fishing today. Instead, he watched a group of salmon fighting against the current towards the mouth of the river and sank back into his thoughts. Oh, to be a fish, Sam mused. Then I could glide silently and gently through the water. I could join a large school and just drift along. Down there in the sea, I could see the most beautiful coral reefs and eat the tastiest algae. The current would take me to the most beautiful places. Without catching a single fish, Sam climbed down from the rock and crossed a meadow toward the forest. On the way there, he casually satisfied his hunger by picking the juicy blackberries from some magnificent bushes and eating them with relish. That's just what I needed, he said contentedly. He enjoyed the sweet fruits with loud smacking sounds so that red juice ran from his mouth. In the afternoon, the sun was high in the sky. Sam began to sweat under his thick fur and looked for shade. When he spotted a large tree with a dense crown of colorful leaves already tinged with autumn colors, he headed straight for a small forest. He looked around and decided to take a little break. Today, I'm just going to do nothing, he grumbled, and decided to just laze around. But just as he was about to make himself comfortable under the shady tree, he suddenly felt a terrible tickling sensation under his fur. "Hey!" Sam cried. He jumped up frantically and shook himself with all his might. He even hopped from one leg to the other, hoping to find the cause of the tingling and tickling in his fur. But nothing happened. Sam was desperate. Now he leaned against the wide tree trunk and rubbed himself against it as hard as he could, but it didn't help. I have to find out who suddenly hid under my fur. He couldn't find anyone even after looking more closely. He sat down under the tree, feeling dejected. Only now did he notice a soft scurrying on the sandy forest floor and saw several small black dots disappearing through the branches. Well, where are these little creatures running to? Sam had never encountered ants before, and now watched the little insects with curiosity. He saw an ant colony crawling down the tree trunk toward the forest. Some of the little creatures seemed to be taking a shortcut through Sam's fur. Sam watched with interest as the little ants scurried along. Curious, he decided to follow them. The little ants were fast and nimble and seemed to have a clear destination in mind. Just as Sam thought he could see the anthill in the distance, he stumbled over an old tree stump. While he had been running so fast after the nimble animals, he didn't notice that he had reached a dead end. The forest around him was now densely overgrown, and tall, thorny bushes grew around him. Sam tried to claw his way through the dense bushes, but the thorny branches immediately caught in his fur. "Ouch!" grumbled the bear. "How could this happen to me?" Sam tried to free himself from the thorns. Thorn by thorn, he carefully pulled them out of his paws. Now he remembered his mother's words, who had always advised him to think first and only then follow a trail. Sam was annoyed at this beginner's mistake. He had focused only on the little ants and their path into the forest and completely forgotten to think about what might await him at the end. When he had freed himself from all the thorns, he looked for a way out. There he encountered the ant colony again, lined up neatly and moving purposefully and seemingly effortlessly through the thorny branches to the other side of the thorn bushes. I wish I were an ant right now. Then I could fit through anywhere and no obstacles could block my way, Sam muttered aloud. Suddenly, Sam was startled out of his thoughts by a strange voice. He looked up and saw a brown squirrel sitting on a narrow branch. I would never have guessed that a bear like you would wish to be a tiny creature like an ant, he heard it call down. But why not? Sam asked in surprise. Because you're a bear, strong and powerful. All the animals have great respect for you and your fellow bears. You bears are strong and brave. You can climb trees, swim, and run fast. You have big paws that can lift and carry anything, and a loud, fearsome voice that makes the whole forest tremble. Sam watched the wildly gesticulating squirrel speechless, fearing that it might fall off the branch at any moment. But the squirrel had a firm grip and talked and talked. Sam was still looking up and was completely surprised that a tiny little squirrel was telling him how lucky he was to be a bear. Shaken awake by what it said, Sam suddenly felt very encouraged. He stood up and stood on both hind legs. It made him immensely tall. Now he had a good overview and saw a way out from the prickly thorn bushes. He was suddenly content and somehow encouraged. It felt good to be a bear again. He no longer wanted to trade places with any fish, bird, or ant. Before disappearing into the depths of the forest, he turned around briefly and looked up joyfully at the little forest dweller. Sam gratefully raised his paw in farewell, even forgetting about the countless ants in his fur. The end. That was funny and cute and sweet. Alright, everyone. I've given you a nice little bedtime story, and with that, I'm gonna get ready to go to bed myself and hopefully get enough sleep tonight so that work doesn't kill me tomorrow. Rest easy, take care everyone, and I'm going to send you all somewhere very, very relaxing. Have a good night, everyone. Sweet dreams and take care.